I didn't really expect tranquility, but for several hours that morning, it almost seemed as though I had discovered it. There were no moving boxes left to transport, no housemates banging kitchen drawers. Just me, a college-era ceramic mug, and the soft drone of a refrigerator that I didn't have to share. I hadn't gotten around to purchasing curtains yet. Sunlight streamed directly through the windows, illuminating the wooden floor as though it was meant to do so, and as though I was meant to be there too. The place wasn't spacious. It had 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a small yard, sufficient for growing some herbs, a few tomatoes, maybe even a lemon tree if I managed to keep it thriving. Still, it belonged to me. I had paid for it with funds I saved over 15 years, bit by bit, shift after shift. No bank loans, no one to co-sign, no cutting corners. That's when my phone vibrated. Calvin Anders, 7:15 a.m. We have to discuss the house. Get in touch as soon as you're able. Initially, I wondered if my father, Calvin Anders, might want to come see it. He didn't really react when I informed him I'd finished up. My mother, Margaret Anders, also had nothing to add. She only gave a non-committal, "That's good, Madeline," before shifting the conversation to how Isabel was still having trouble renting an apartment downtown. My sister, 3 years younger than me, held an art history degree, had no job, yet had thousands of followers for her gentle, soft girl style. She stayed at home and always seemed to be waiting for the world to clear a path for her, and somehow it inevitably did. I put my cup down and gave my father a call. His expression on the screen was lined and impossible to interpret. There wasn't a grin or even a hello. "We've discussed things," he told me, "and we believe it's more just if my sister was given the house." I stared in disbelief. "What?" "She's overwhelmed by student loans." "You're in a good position," he said. "You could just as easily buy yourself another property." The meaning of his words sank in gradually. It didn't hit me with the force of a punch, but seeped in, a persistent, heavy sensation pressing on my chest that refused to let up. "We raised you," he continued, his tone becoming resolute. "It's time for you to start contributing to the family." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I sat there, listening to my father breathing on the other side of the line. His breath moved in calm, even cycles, almost as if my father was getting ready for me to object. But I held back. At least, for the moment, I kept silent. My sister was always the sibling who needed to be bailed out. When my tuition was overdue, they stepped in to pay it. If I broke down in tears during finals, someone comforted me. I even flew all the way to Brussels in search of artistic inspiration. After my parents bought my sister her first car at 17 and she wrecked it, they simply replaced it. As for me, I relied on public transportation until I was 22. "You're in tech," he pressed further. "Cybersecurity, right? You earn a solid salary. And Isabel's going through a really fragile period right now." "A fragile period?" I repeated. "She's working hard to create something meaningful. And she can't do that without a foundation. This house could offer her that kind of support." Just before I could respond, my mother's face appeared on the call. My mother, still wrapped in her robe, spoke in that gentle tone that made even the harshest truths sound considerate. "Madeline," she addressed me softly, "we provided everything we possibly could for you, and all we're asking is that you now do the same for your sister." "You didn't give me this house," I replied. "That's true," she conceded. "But we brought you up. We were there to help you. Without us, you couldn't have reached this point." Her words flowed out effortlessly, as if rehearsed. There was no anger or harshness, yet it felt as though she was quietly scooping the breath from my lungs. My sister came up once more. I recalled each instance when I had turned to them for assistance in my younger days. Money for textbooks, help with rent, someone to co-sign. Each time, I was met with the same explanation. "We're putting my sister's education first." In the end, I simply stopped making requests. I figured out how to survive on gratuities and quick meals of instant noodles. I was 34. I had put my signature on the deed, handled the down payment, arranged for utilities, lugged in the furniture with my own hands, and yet there they stood, offering soft smiles as they gradually chipped away at the one thing I had managed to accomplish by myself. "You're being selfish," my mother told me. That single word was the wound that cut most deeply. It wasn't the request, or even the expectation that hurt so much, but rather hearing her call me selfish, as if deciding to hold on to the thing I had earned was somehow a betrayal. Calvin Anders, my father, then leaned closer, his face tightening. "You have a moral duty," he said, "to this family." I chose not to shout. I chose not to give a justification. I simply ended the call. It wasn't because I was angry, but because I realized that if I kept listening, I might never want to speak to them again. 10 days later, someone from a courier service came knocking at my door. Legal paperwork. My parents had initiated a lawsuit against me. When I pulled the papers from the envelope, I didn't really experience any surprise. In truth, it just seemed like confirmation, as though the silent worry I had always harbored had finally been officially documented. Calvin and Margaret Anders, with Isabel Anders, claimed that I failed to repay family debt support. They requested that I transfer the house to my sister, assume full responsibility for the remaining mortgage, and pay monetary damages for emotional suffering. There was even a precise dollar value, either $315 or $260. Evidently, that's what my upbringing supposedly amounted to. I lowered myself to the floor in my living room, allowing the quiet to fill the space. The walls still stood empty. I hadn't taken the time to put up a single decoration yet. The house no longer felt like it belonged to me. Now, it just resembled a piece of evidence. They claimed I owed them because my achievements were only possible thanks to their initial financial help. As though my existence was simply an investment portfolio, they had the authority to organize, as though affection always arrived accompanied by a bill that would just show up later. Yet, that's not how it lives in my memory. I began earning my own money when I turned 17. My initial job involved delivering pizzas. After that, I packed groceries, tidied up movie theaters, and once spent a season sorting undelivered mail at the post office. I took any job that would give me just enough money to get by. At 19, I was already supporting myself. I skipped out on prom, putting money aside to buy a 1998 Honda with 180,000 miles on it and no rear-view mirror. The places I lived were cramped studio apartments, always tinged with the harsh scent of bleach and uncertainty. I enrolled at the local community college, attended evening coding classes, participated in a boot camp, earned a certification, and later obtained another one. There was no magic behind it, just relentless effort. All the while, my sister was spending time in Naples on a journey of self-discovery. People described her as sensitive and creative, brimming with promise. She studied art history at a private university, spending spring vacations in Marseille and summers in Hamburg. My parents, Calvin Anders and Margaret Anders, covered every expense: tuition, rent, holidays, and even the outfits my sister Isabel showcased in her photo sessions. My reaction wasn't envy. Instead, I became more reserved. I can still recall writing my mother during my freshman year to ask if she might help me pay for an $85 textbook required for my data structures class. She answered that same evening, "We're putting our financial resources toward my sister at this time. I hope that's clear." I did understand, and after that, I stopped making requests. But despite everything, I never could have predicted this outcome. Certainly not a lawsuit. Certainly not being accused of owing them my house simply because I had managed to create something on my own, without their involvement. Honestly, that was the heart of it, wasn't it? Maintaining control. I was no longer under their sway. and that left them deeply unsettled. The morning after I was served legal papers, my sister shared a story on Pickshare. It showed a photograph of a sunlit kitchen, featuring pristine white subway tiles, gleaming brass hardware, and rows of tiny jars of herbs arranged with care along the window ledge. The caption beneath the photo read, "Can't wait to turn this into a home." I felt deeply thankful to my family for standing up for justice. That picture wasn't from my kitchen. In fact, it didn't come from any real property. When I did a reverse image search on CraftNest, the comments still came flooding in. "You deserve it, sweetheart. Every true queen earns her own castle. I'm so glad you stood your ground." I chose not to respond. I kept silent online. What could I possibly say? Isabel was well aware that I purchased the home myself. She understood that the down payment, $650,000, came straight from my own savings. She knew I'd spent 5 hours each night sleeping for years just to accomplish this. Yet Isabel refused to recognize the house as mine. To her, it belonged to her. Or to be honest, she considered my achievement a challenge. Maybe because, for once, she wasn't the one responsible for it. It hadn't been given to her. It's not as though my sister was unkind. She could actually be quite pleasant and considerate at times. Occasionally she mailed me cards or reached out when she wanted help dealing with boyfriends, lease issues, or difficult instructors. Still, she seemed to be living out a separate narrative. In her version, she cast herself as the neglected one, the sensitive, creative soul, the well-intentioned daughter who simply suffered from misfortune. And my parents nurtured that story with the faith of true believers. "She struggled a lot," my mother mentioned once, when my sister returned from Naples ahead of schedule, because she found the apartment's energy unsettling. Struggled. While this was happening, I was quietly dealing with an IRS audit because I had mistakenly reported myself as self-employed instead of as a W-2 earner. I managed to take care of everything without any fuss. The more I proved my competence, the less I seemed to matter or be noticed. That's how favoritism works when disguised as equality. It never yells or hits. It just quietly paves the road for one child, while I gradually learn to slip out of sight. And when I eventually say no, it comes across as defiance. That week, my aunt, Carolyn Pierce, my mother's sibling, gave me a call. We had gone years without a conversation. Carolyn was angry that I hadn't included her in my graduation from community college. She claimed my actions were disrespectful. She accused me of becoming arrogant because of my achievements. I refrained from explaining that I hadn't invited a single person. In fact, I hadn't even participated in the ceremony. It was just an associate's degree. I had to work a double shift on that particular day. 3 months later, I discovered that Carolyn had secretly financed my parents' legal battle. Her reason wasn't that she believed my sister should inherit the house, but rather that she was convinced I needed to be taken down a peg. The initial court date landed 3 months after I received the legal notifications. I arrived earlier than planned. I didn't have an attorney, just a navy suit I'd used for job interviews, and a folder jammed with all the paperwork I'd spent weeks collecting. Bank records, earnings statements, the mortgage, closing disclosures, and even the email I used to send the wired deposit. When my parents came in, I could barely recognize them. They didn't arrive alone. My sister accompanied them, gripping my mother's arm as if she feared she was heading off to war. Carolyn Pierce followed behind us, her hair perfectly curled and her gaze piercing. We were all dressed in matching white t-shirts. Bold black lettering stretched across our chests. "Family comes first." I didn't say a word. Instead, I turned my head toward the front and simply waited. The bailiff announced the case number. We all got to our feet. The courtroom was hushed and chilled under the fluorescent lights. There weren't many people present. Only the judge, the clerk, the court reporter, and a few unknown faces who looked like specters lingered on the benches behind us. When the judge invited the plaintiffs to state their case, their attorney, who looked far too weary to truly care, stood and read from a script he had prepared. My family argues that I would not be facing my present financial circumstances if not for their devotion, emotional, practical, and monetary, throughout my childhood. In acknowledgement of this, and considering my sister's ongoing financial struggles, I believe it is just and ethical for me to sign over the house I recently acquired to her, while still paying the mortgage for a transitional span of 3 years. The judge turned his attention toward me. "Do you wish to reply, Miss Porter?" I rose from my seat slowly, my voice steady. "Your Honor, I alone hold the mortgage for that house. Every cent came out of my own pocket. The deed lists no co-owner, and there is nobody else's name involved. My parents did not provide loans. There are no joint accounts, no documentation, and no legal responsibility." I presented the judge with a neatly prepared set of my documents. The room fell into a hush, a prolonged stillness, and that's when the chaos erupted. My sister moved closer, already crying, and reached out to embrace me. "I forgive you," she murmured, making sure everyone could hear. "I forgive you for taking this so far." I drew away from her. She lost her balance for a second. My mother, Margaret, inhaled sharply as if I had hit her. From behind me, Carolyn grumbled under her breath, "Shameful child." The judge struck her gavel. "Let's have order, please." Our attorney resumed, this time displaying childhood vacation photo albums I could scarcely recall. He brandished a copy of a $12.99 Happy Meal receipt from 2003, attempting to show proof of their contributions. They entered into evidence a screenshot of a message I once sent. "Love you all." This was labeled as evidence of emotional bonds. My sister brought up her idea for an artist's retreat. "I hope to transform the home into a sanctuary for fellow creatives like me." The judge inquired, "Have you ever earned income from this work?" My sister hesitated before giving a small smile. "I work as a digital creator, and I'm working to establish my own brand, but it requires patience." The judge, however, wanted further clarification about my current earnings. My sister's gaze went to my mother. My mother spoke on my sister's behalf, explaining that she was in a period of transition. What happened next completely took me by surprise. The judge then shifted her attention to me. "Miss Porter," she addressed me directly, "do you have any other evidence you'd like to add?" I nodded and handed over a compact folder. Contained inside were messages I had sent during my college days, requests for assistance with tuition, textbooks, and even food. The response was unwavering each time. "Our support is currently directed toward Isabel." The judge reviewed the papers quietly, and when she finally made eye contact with me, she remained silent. She leaned back into her chair, scanning the room with an expression that suggested a dawning realization about the true situation. 4 days after, her official ruling was announced. Case thrown out. No basis in law. Simple as that. No outpouring of emotion, no spectacle, just an understated sentence on a formal document, confirming what I had always believed. You can't bring a lawsuit against your own child simply because they choose to leave. Yet the quiet was short-lived. The morning after the case was dropped, I got home from my job and reviewed my security camera recordings, cameras I'd put up following the initial court notice, driven more by instinct than worry. There she was, my sister, Isabel Anders, waiting by my vehicle in the driveway, scanning the area as though she was expecting someone to show up. She didn't do anything. She just stood there anxiously, unmoving, until she finally walked away. About 10 minutes after that, my Aunt Carolyn Pierce showed up. Her movements were slower, more purposeful. She had a spray paint can with her, but when my motion-activated light turned on, she hesitated, looked upward, then pivoted and left. That night, I reported everything to the police. The following afternoon, Fundraiser Connect became the way I started over after my sister Isabel took my house away. She reused an old craft nest kitchen image, insisted I had abused the court process, and disregarded our family's principles. My mother, Margaret Anders, took to posting in neighborhood Friend Connect groups, labeling me as unappreciative and blaming me for splitting the family apart. Soon after, I received the message. Because of the situation, I wasn't invited to Thanksgiving until I tried to fix everything. I let the message sit without replying. Instead, I ordered some Chinese food and settled in with a documentary about shipwrecks. Within a few days, our family group chat started unraveling. My cousin, Heather, was the first to speak up. "You paid for my sister's $180,000 education while I worked nights to put myself through community college, and now you want my house too." That's when another cousin joined in. "I remember asking for $175 for textbooks, but you claimed you couldn't spare it, although my sister got a MacBook around the same time." 10 days later, the group chat blew up. Usually quiet relatives who had kept their opinions to themselves for years suddenly began recalling what had been lost to them. Even my grandfather, Harold Anders, my father's father, decided to speak. "You two are shameful." She triumphed despite me, not because of anything I did. I reread his comment. That line struck me harder than the court decision ever had. It was the first occasion anyone in my family had ever admitted it openly. It's now been 8 months since the court's judgment. I have not talked with my parents during this time. They continue to text once in a while. My mother, Margaret Anders, writes things like, "We're having financial trouble. When are you coming back?" My sister can't secure permanent housing. She's in pain, and I know it. My father, Calvin, sent one email, brief, distant. "When will you forgive us? Families are supposed to stay united." I didn't answer, but I didn't block their messages either. I just let the words appear and then fade away. My sister now works part-time at Maple Bean Cafe. She shares Pickshare stories, venting about impolite customers and challenging family situations. Her Fundraiser Connect campaign was removed for breaking the site's policies. My aunt, Carolyn Pierce, received an official reprimand from her employer after she used her corporate email to send me harassing messages. The house remains silent, but now the atmosphere has shifted. It feels secure. There is a German Shepherd mix dozing by my feet as I type this. Her name is Luna, and I rescued her from the animal shelter 3 months ago. She has one droopy ear and a mark by her foot, as if she's survived some hardships herself. We get along just fine. My grandfather, Harold Anders, started visiting every Sunday. It seems he'd been making the effort for years. He said my parents always found reasons to keep him at bay. They were too occupied, too drained, or it was never the right moment. I didn't press for details. He never offered any answers. Now he stops by each week, carrying a paper sack with groceries and a brand new tool for my garage. We keep our meals basic. We have conversations about the weather, repairs to doors, and other topics that don't demand any pretense. A week and a half ago, he showed up with a photograph. I had never seen an image of myself at my community college graduation before. I hadn't invited him or anyone else. Yet there he was, way in the back, hands shoved into his pockets, observing from outside the fence. "I never missed you," he told me. "I just wasn't permitted to be near." Then meeting my gaze, he said, "I'm proud of you, Madeline. You didn't let anyone take what didn't belong to them." I did not shed tears. I just gave a nod, refilled his coffee, and remained beside him as dusk settled over the yard. Now and then, I still feel tempted to spell it all out, to send one long message laying everything bare. Every unpaid debt, every silent pain, each moment I decided to hold back from shouting. However, Luna settles in by the back entryway. The fading light drapes gently over the wooden floor. I remind myself that I don't need to justify my thriving to anyone, not even to the ones who raised me. The deed rests inside a drawer beside the window. This is more than just a home. It's evidence that I escaped, stayed away, and didn't come back for their affection. I returned so their deception would finally end. It's not necessary to reveal every detail. Just offer a single word they refuse to utter.